Welcome again to another Curator's Chat. I'm Jason French, Curator of Collections at the Behringer-Crawford Museum. As you probably can tell, I'm not at the Behringer-Crawford Museum today. Today we're very honored to have the opportunity to be here at the Cathedral in Covington and speaking with the historian Stephen Ensweiler. So Stephen, you have some history that you were going to tell us, and you've been sharing some of the history of the cathedral with us here. Could you share with our audience a little bit about how this cathedral came to be and when?
Well, the story really begins in 1885 when Bishop Moz came here, when he became the Bishop of Covington. And within about the first 6 months of his episcopacy, he began to find all these problems, one of which was just a profound debt. Also, a lot of the parishes, there were 42 parishes in the diocese at the time, which was basically the eastern half of Kentucky. And the parishioners in these dioceses, in these parishes, didn't really relate to the bishop or to the cathedral here in Covington. They were kind of going their own way, spiritually. And Moz described this as the spiritual narrowness of the people. So they were doing their own thing, and basically the diocese was coming apart. It was fragmenting. And it was because, of the debt and because of the great distances that people had to travel in those days. Remember, we're still talking about horseback and wagons and things like that. But Moz felt that he had been put here for a reason, and he started to try to find ways to get funds, but he was just totally unsuccessful at all of his attempts. He begged businessmen, he begged parishioners to give on Sundays, and just nothing was enough. But he had this thing called faith, and he felt that if God wanted this new cathedral to be built, that it would happen. And we have to remember, what I forgot to mention also is this narrowness of the people. If you wanted a symbol of that, all you had to do is go back and look at the old cathedral, the original cathedral, which by 1885 was coming apart. It was, the roof leaked, the facade was losing its brick, there was, the brickwork was beginning to deteriorate and decay, and it was being derided by the newspapers and by the public, who thought that the diocese could do better than that old place. So Moz had a big task on his hand, and he didn't know what to do. There was just no money to be had anywhere. And the Kentucky Post tells a story of a little girl who visited him one day and put a silver dollar in his hand. And she said, "This is all I have, but I want you to build a new cathedral with it." And Moz seemed to have taken that as some sort of a providential commission, because the rest of his time as bishop was spent, we'd use the term OCD, obsessive compulsive, but he was obsessed with getting this cathedral built. And shortly after that, everything began to happen. He got a donation of $25,000 from a James Walsh, who had recently passed away from his estate. And then 2 years later, his partner, Peter O'Shaughnessy, gave him over $100,000 to start work on this cathedral. And then all the pieces started to fall into place. He happened to know from his time in Detroit, when he'd been a priest there, that this man named Leon Cocard, he was 31 years old, and he happened to be a Gothic architect. He had worked with an Albert French on St. Anne's of Detroit up there, which Moz was a great admirer of the architecture of St. Anne's, and actually sort of had that idea for this cathedral here. But Leon Cocard was employed, and then all the other parts started to come together. The plans were built, were drawn. The groundbreaking happened in April of 1894, and for the next 6 years, construction commenced. In 1895, the cornerstone was laid, which is behind me, behind the bishop's cathedra. And in that cornerstone is a little velvet box in a time capsule with that silver dollar that little girl had given him. In 1901, he basically ran out of funds, and he couldn't put a facade on the front. So the front was bricked up, but it was dedicated on January 27th of 1901, and we finally had our new cathedral in Covington. Leon Cocard was unable to continue with the facade construction due to health reasons, and Bishop Maas hired David Davis from Newport. And David Davis happened to be a Gothic architect. So again, another piece of the puzzle fits in place. And you got to remember, Maas was thinking that if God wanted this to happen, he'd find a way for it to happen. The funds happened, and just the right people came together at the right time to produce this magnificent edifice that we're standing in today. In 1908, the facade was finally put on. It was 1910, it was completed. And at the same time, Bishop Maas was installing all of these beautiful windows that we see around us, which were made in Munich, Germany by Mayer and Company, followed by the mosaic Stations of the Cross, which were actually made of Venetian glass in Venice, Italy by Antonio Castaman. And then all of the rest of the artwork began to happen after that. There was a pause in the 1930s, but by the 1940s with Bishop Malloy, we began to have all of the German oak and all of the woodwork that you see in the sanctuary go in. And the most recent addition are the statues that Bishop Foys has had put into the jambs and the niches on the front of the cathedral. So that's pretty much an overview of the cathedral as we're in it today. Cathedrals are never finished, and just like, I suppose, the journey of faith, it's never really completed.
What differentiates a basilica from a cathedral?
A cathedral comes with a diocese and a bishop, and they call it a cathedral because of the cathedra, which is a Greek word meaning a chair. And that chair, if you look behind me, the bishop's cathedra, which was commissioned by Bishop Malloy in the 50s, that is the symbol of the bishop's teaching authority of the faith, teaching of the faith, his authority to teach the faith. And the tradition of the cathedra goes back 2,000 years to St. Peter. A basilica is an honorific title that's granted by the Pope for a structure that has a particular beauty or historical significance. And the symbols of a cathedra, of a basilica, are what we call the bell. It's officially called a tintinnabulum. There's also an umbrella, which is called the canopeum, or the umbrellicum, or the ombrellino. And there's also the cross keys, which are the papal cross keys, which are also, you see them throughout the Cathedral Basilica here.
I hope you've enjoyed this Curator's Chat. Feel free to like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you on our next chat.